My friend Jane, who's an EMDR therapist, likes to say that trauma is like poop. We all have it, but nobody wants to talk about it. But believe me when I say that it can hold you back from having the life and the career that you want. When your company talks about bringing your whole self to work, they are definitely not talking about your trauma. So today we are talking about 4 modalities that help you process and alleviate trauma. Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm an executive career coach who works with mid to senior level corporate women, helping them rise through the ranks, get promoted, and transition into life they love, including cultures that are healthy, which is why that we are talking about trauma today. So, full disclosure, I did not have a good childhood. My father was mentally ill and would often erupt into fits of violence, and because like attracts like, I had a mother that was emotionally immature and often relied on her children to parent her. So as an adult, I was diagnosed with something called CPTSD, and the C stands for chronic. So rather than having one episode that was very, very traumatic, much like going to war, going into battle, rather I had a lifetime, the course of my childhood, that was very chaotic and very stressful in that way. I share that because I tried a number of different healing modalities that didn't work for me before finding ones that did. One that didn't work for trauma, and it doesn't mean just because it didn't work for me that it doesn't work for other people, but it was talk therapy or cognitive behavior therapy. So I did this with 4 different practitioners for about 15 years. And while I did begin to understand that, like I say, I was in this swamp where I had low self-esteem and limiting beliefs and shame spirals very, very often, it ultimately didn't help bring me out of the swamp or give me a roadmap out of the swamp, which was what I wanted. But let me tell you what did. Number 1, coaching. So in my 30s, I got divorced, and a good friend of mine who was going through coach training at the time recommended that I see a coach instead of a therapist, and I did. A woman named Laura Murphy, and I'm going to link her website down below. But I credit Laura and her approach and the coaching approach to really transforming my life and helping me create a career and a life that I love today. So a couple of different things that made Laura different. 1, the roadmap. So each week I had homework and actionable steps for which I was accountable, and I made sure that I did them because I had to check in with Laura on Tuesday, and I had to tell her whether or not I had that critical conversation, or I went to that yoga class and was creating the life that I said I wanted to have. It made all the difference in the world. And because Laura was a direct communicator, we would talk about something several times, and rather than her just being a sounding board and nodding and listening, she would say, "We've talked about this several times. What feels incomplete for you?" with just a very, very compassionate setting. But what it did is it allowed me to dive underneath and understand how the trauma I experienced had infiltrated every facet of my life. And because of that, I wasn't allowed to stay on the surface. I had to go deep, and I had to heal it. The second thing that made Laura different was the fact that she shared herself. She shared a bit about her spirituality. She shared a bit about her past. And in allowing herself to show up as human rather than this scholar on a platform, it really made me feel as though I was not alone and as though what I was asking out of life was not too much. And I'm not sure whether it was a personal preference or some code of conduct that made my past therapists not share that part of themselves. But for me, it was a real game changer. It made me braver, it made me take risks, it allowed me to create new experiences, and ultimately the life that I have today. Number 2, EMDR therapy. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprogramming. So what it means, it's based on the idea that traumatic memories are in a certain part of the brain where they can be relived as soon as a stimulus triggers them versus stored as a memory so you can talk about them and move on with your day or roam about the cabin freely, as I like to say. For me, I was often triggered by a male, an older male, in a position of authority. And just by the makeup of corporate America, that happened pretty often, and it was not very good for my career. But by simply stimulating both sides of the body, either through eye movement or through body tappers, which was my preference, it allowed me to relive my childhood in a way that allowed it to be stored as a memory and processed rather than sitting at the forefront, popping out like a beach ball underwater at the most inconvenient times. It was quick too. So I spent 15 years, as I stated, in cognitive behavior therapy, and with EMDR therapy, I was able to process my entire childhood so I could talk about it and not be triggered by it in 6 to 7 months. Now, full disclosure, on occasion, I still go back and see my therapist when something triggering occurs. So for example, I almost died in childbirth, and I definitely went back and saw her a couple times after that. But otherwise, I feel really free, and I'm able to sit here and discuss my past with you, and it allows me to show up in a way in which I can hold space for other people. Number 3, a somatic chiropractor. So I started seeing a somatic chiropractor recently, and it has been a game changer. Full disclosure, I do not fully understand how it works. All I know is that it actually does work. So you've probably heard the phrase, the body keeps score, or that trauma is stored in the body, and it is through the nervous system, which means that there's an emotional component to any movement or any touch points on our body. So the chiropractor, my doctor, will touch certain pressure points or gateways, as she calls them. And what this allows the body to do is it allows the brain to send a message to the nervous system and create a sense of safety and a sense of healing throughout the body. So while both a traditional chiropractor and a somatic chiropractor will improve skeletal mobility, help alleviate pain, improve joint mobility, the traditional chiropractor does so with a lot of really strong manipulations versus somatic chiropractor. It's a gentle pressure point that allows the brain to stimulate the body's own healing and reprocess the emotional component as well. Like I said, it's been a game changer for me. And number 4, which might be a little bit out there for some people, but I want to discuss it, is past life regression. So full disclosure, reincarnation is a strong principle that I believe in as far as my spiritual practice today, but I did not grow up that way. I grew up with a Southern Baptist mother. It was a very, very rigid Christian household, and we did not believe in reincarnation. But I allowed myself to open up to it when I learned that Constantine rewrote the Bible 400 years after the death of Christ and eliminated reincarnation because he thought it would give the people too much freedom. Can't have that, can we? The other piece about reincarnation and past life regression that really kind of held me back for a while was that it seemed too hippy-dippy woo-woo. So if you're an overly intellectual person like myself, I'd love to recommend Dr. Brian Weiss, and I'll put his website in the comments below. Dr. Weiss is also an overly intellectual person. He trained at Columbia and Yale Medical School and eventually became the head of psychiatry at Mount Sinai in Miami. Now, he used hypnosis in his practice with patients, and one day he had a patient who he'd been seeing about 18 months, and they didn't really seem to be progressing the way he thought they would. Out of frustration, he said to her, she had a fear of water and a fear of drowning, "I want you to remember the first time you were afraid of water." And he said it a little crisply, and he thought she'd go back to the age of 2 when she fell in the bathtub. Instead of going back to the age of 2, she went back 2,000 years to ancient Greece, where she died in a tidal wave with her then daughter. Neither Dr. Weiss nor the woman Catherine believed in reincarnation. Dr. Weiss was raised Jewish, she was raised Catholic, but they couldn't deny that it brought a relief to many of her symptoms. So they continued down this path, and Dr. Weiss eventually started to incorporate this with other patients as well. I myself have done several past life healings, and I have just found it an incredible release, to be honest. The reason is if we're afraid of things that are going to happen in this lifetime, and we have the ability to understand that it continues not just for ourselves, but with other people that we love, then that can allow you to take risks, to move about the cabin, and do things that will help you create a career and a life that works for you. It's explained a lot of my fears. It's explained these weird connections I have to places that I've never been. For example, the first time I went to Rome and in the Forum in Rome where the ancient Romans lived, I could have given a tour myself. I felt so connected. It was very deja vu and very at home there. And I've remembered several lives I've had and lived in ancient Rome. So have you tried any of these healing modalities? If so, I would love to hear your experience in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, please share, like, and subscribe. I come out with new videos each week, and so I'll see you then. Take care.